Welcome back. I'm Stephanie Rule. A new report says that the greatest growing threat to the United States is China. Axios reveals China has, quote, outlined strategies for 2018, 2025, and 2050, all designed to displace the United States as the dominant global economic and national security superpower. We are seeing one of the economic battles playing out in real time, with threats of a trade war easing after President Trump puts his call to impose tariffs against China on hold. This all started after President Trump claimed the U.S. lost $500 billion on trade with China last year. But that figure, it doesn't pan out. The U.S. ran up a trade deficit with China of $375 billion in 2017. And U.S. firms actually ran up a $39 billion surplus in services with the Chinese. And it's really important to note, trade deficits, as much as they are fueled by the Chinese government policy, they're also fueled by U.S. demand. It's stunning. It's as though the president has no idea how trade deficits work. And then there's this. With today's global supply chains, a made-in-China smartphone, okay, stay with me, one of these can contain up to 30% of their parts from the United States. And here's the thing. The U.S. trade data, they do a terrible job accounting for this. They don't put it in their data when they talk about finished goods. If they actually change the way they evaluate the data, we could see the trade deficit numbers go down by as much as 36% by not even doing anything about the way we supply our stuff. It's just about the way we add the numbers. I want now to bring in the co-founder of Axios, Jim Vandehei. Jim, I saw your report on Monday, and it was stunning to me. First, China's got their 2018, 25, and 50 plan. The United States, our administration, is still smacking each other in meetings and don't know what they want to do next Tuesday. Everything that Larry Kudlow has said, he's had to talk back.
Yeah, it's. I think so often in politics, particularly in this era of Twitter, and so many people focused on cable, we're thinking about in the moment. We're not thinking long term. The Chinese obviously are notorious for thinking long term, but now in particular, they really have laid out strategies this year, 2025, 2050, to essentially eat our lunch economically. I mean, with money comes power, and every year they're sucking up more and more of the global economy, often at the cost to us. And politicians here don't think about it long term, but when you look at what China's doing, look at how much money they pour into infrastructure. Look at what they're doing while we retreat on the global stage. They're pouring money and people and ties into almost every continent on the globe to make sure that they have an economic relationship with other countries, that they get trade deals with other countries so that they can continue to grow, often at our expense. And a lot of this is on us. We sit here and freak out about, or the president freaks out about a trade deficit. But the bigger problem really are like how easy it is for China to use its authoritarian regime to force our companies to turn over our technology to them that they can then exploit for China's gain. And a lot of this stuff gets lost. A lot of it is in the policy weeds, but it's not in the policy weeds to the Chinese. It's part of their long-term strategy.
But that's also why it is absurd for us to lighten up on ZTE, one of the few companies we're going after because they're a national security risk. But when you talk about China being able to make these long-term decisions, don't we have to feel some level of sympathy for our lawmakers that we're subject to short-termism here? Xi Jinping is going to be in office for the rest of his life. And whether we're talking about a lawmaker who needs to get reelected in the next few years or a CEO that has shareholders and Wall Street analysts beating down his or her neck every day, our leadership cannot make long-term good moves. We won't let them.
It really is a fundamental defect in our government right now. It always has been, but certainly now when technology is changing everything so quickly, we're ill-equipped to be able to move quickly and also to think long-term in terms of how do we structure our education system, how do we structure trade, how do we structure our regulatory and tax system to make sure that we can sort of take on China. And one of the points I made in the piece is that this is an area where someone could unify sort of the country not against each other, Republican versus Democrat, but against China, and not necessarily saying you got to go to war with China or that they're a military villain, which they could become a military villain, but that they are an economic villain. They are the other side of the equation.
A great way to do it would be to sign TPP and not just band together as a country, work with our allies to put pressure on China. And of course, the president decided he didn't want to do that. He wanted a better plan, a plan that he's not yet shown us.
And look at what the Germans are doing. You have Germany, which is one of the great U.S. allies, wants to do tons of trade with us, is very frustrated that we're pulling back from all of our alliances, all of our trade deals. And what are they doing? They're meeting with the Chinese, and they're looking at, is there a better deal to be had? And the Chinese are smart. They see that as we retreat. Remember when the head of China went to Davos, and what did he say? He said, listen, I want to fill that void. If it's going to be America first, let's have sort of China globally. And this is at a time where all these other countries, most of them would much rather do business with us. They prefer our ideals, certainly to the communist ideals.
Without a doubt, but they need predictability, and they need
predictability, and they need a marketplace. And you're looking at China. Look, the other thing that happened this week, no one paid attention to. China used to have a one-child policy, then they turned it to a two-child policy. Now they're going to let Chinese have as many kids as they want. Why does that matter? Because they have 1.3 billion customers right now, and now they're going to have that will allow their population to grow to 1.4 or 1.5 at a time where our population is not raising. That gives them more customers, more workers, and they think about that. And obviously they have an authoritarian regime that can engineer things however the hell it wants to. We don't have that luxury. I think Trump would like to have it, but you don't have it in the United States. But if you can somehow grab those lawmakers by the lapel and you start to think, okay, how do we think more long term? Looking at the China example in terms of how they do it, at least laying out a document and a vision, is one way to do it.